Going on, everybody? Welcome into the Highlight of Business Podcast for Business People. And today I have a really fun guest. I'm really excited about this show. This is like one of my really good friends. I met this guy a couple years ago when we worked together on the Entre Leadership brand at Ramsey Solutions.
Yeah.
And the guy has taught me so much about business and friendship and being a dad and everything. And I'm just really excited to have this man on the show today. The one, the only Tiny Irwin, the owner of Southern Whiskey Society, and
Mhm.
just general all around good dude and connector. Tiny, welcome to the show, man.
And thanks, Chandler. You're making me blush. Not many people can make me blush.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna add that to my resume, like
Love it.
official blush maker, man.
Oh man,
Well,
thanks for having me.
yeah, man, of course. Well, I want to get all into the Southern Whiskey Society and what that is and why you're so passionate about it. But you and I met, like I said, while you were a business coach. And I'd love you to just sort of tell the story of how you got into business coaching and why you got into it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. We've been here in Nashville for 4 years, and before that, we lived out in Portland, Oregon. And I like to tell people my last real job, I was the president and chief operating officer for a third generation, 95-year-old beer wholesaler. So not many better places to do that than Portland, right?
Mm,
So craft capital of the world. I worked for Miller Coors for years before that, and a family that owned the wholesaler had brought me in as a trained professional. They hadn't brought a new leader in from outside the company ever.
mm,
And they had the same leadership in place for the previous 25 years. And they were just under some external pressures to change and to get current with the times. And they hired me because I had a reputation for driving change within the industry. So they literally brought me in and gave me the keys to the castle and just said, fix it. And I didn't even know what that meant. At that point, I was in my early 40s. I'd never run a business before, let alone a company that was doing 50 million in revenue, 120 employees. It
mm,
had been around that long, right? 90 at that
right.
point, it was 90 years. And so I literally remember Googling business leadership back in 2013,
Oh
and
my
Dave
gosh.
Ramsey's name popped up. And I was like, "What's the credit card guy know about business?" And they had just announced their first live event for Entree Leadership, and it was their first ever summit down in San Diego, California. I was in Portland. I lived in San Diego for 3 years. Great excuse to go back, so I went back, and it was one of those aha moments where he had guys like Lencioni and Jim Collins and Henry Cloud, all of these thought leaders that I'd studied in grad school. And now I'm sitting there listening to them live and I'm saying, yes, these are the philosophies, these are the principles that I need to grab a hold of to really make a change in the company. The
Mm,
things I needed to do at the organization were never taught in undergrad or grad school. So I leaned into those, and I leaned into Entre Leadership. I became a client. I went to the master series. I ended up, revamping my entire leadership team, and sent them to all the events as well. And so
mm,
just really became entrenched in all of those thought leaders that Dave surrounded himself with. And so in 2018, the family had decided to exit the industry, and they were getting older. And so I sold the company for them. And I looked around and said, man, I looked at what I was able to do over the 5 years of being there and where we had started and where we came from. But then I also asked myself, well, what if I would have been able to do this in 2 years versus five?
mm,
Because we went from losing, from it was 120 employees, about 52 million in revenue, to in 2018 we were 175 employees, 74 million in revenue. We went from losing money every year to making millions. And
mm.
so there was a lot of business changes that had to happen, cultural changes, philosophical changes. I was like, what if I could help business owners do that in an abbreviated amount of time versus 5 years? So that's
Mm,
what I threw myself into. And I launched my own coaching and consulting business based off of the philosophies of all these business thought leaders, in Portland in late 2019. And then COVID hit, and we had bought our dream home. We were living in the country,
mm.
but then there was isolation. And
Yeah.
in the Northwest during 20, there was no hope of anything opening anytime soon.
Right.
So I had, I threw threw the bat signal up to some friends around the country. A guy I knew in the Franklin area said, "Yeah, hey, listen, things we're feeling good. We're back in the office," and he happened to work in Entree Leadership. He worked for Dave, and he asked me, "What would you do if you came here?" I said, "Well, I guess I'd probably ask you what Dave has because I got nothing right now." And and he said the recruiter will call you in 5 minutes. And 34 days later, we moved to Franklin, Tennessee.
Yeah, I remember that day. I remember when they said we were getting a guy named Tiny, and he is not Tiny, which is
No,
hilarious to me. It's still our favorite, my favorite part about you, I think, or at least one of the favorite parts about you. So,
nice.
so you said something in there about like, okay, I'm going to take this timeline of 5 years and like the efficiency to like short it down to two
Yeah,
years. And what I have learned, and you and I think this is why we get along so well. It's that like you've led a large organization, which I've not done yet in my career. You're a little older than me, so it's okay that I'm not
just a little bit.
quite caught up with you. Yeah, I love to give a little jab every once. I gotta give it to you. But you've led that large organization for another company. Was it a family owned business? The
Yeah, yeah.
the
It
wholesale.
was third generation, which
Yeah,
is the point where most of them tend to fall apart.
yeah. Well, I mean, if they even make it that far, so the fact
Right.
that they even made it that far is incredible. But yeah, third generation. Now we've lost some founders, stories and all that. But you led that organization, but then you also like after we left Ramsey, you ended up launching your own coaching business. So you started your own business again, which was incredibly successful, and you ended up buying a business, which was the Southern Whiskey Society, which we'll get into here in just a minute.
Yeah.
And what I would love to know, at least from my perspective, businesses are pretty much the same, more or less. Like my favorite saying is, business is 85% the same. It's the last 15% that makes you whatever you do.
Yep.
And, because we all have sales, we all have marketing, we all have people, we all have leadership, we all have doubt, we all have the same things. Like, what are the things that keep businesses from making it to the level they want to get to? Because the SBA tells us it's like normal entrepreneurs make about $46,000 a year, which is worse than an entry level job in today's age.
Yeah.
And then the risk you're taking from a financial standpoint, a lot of these people are borrowing a ton of money to open up or do whatever, and it's like they're not actually going to make it. Like what is the differentiators between those that do make it, you think, from a leadership standpoint, and the
Yeah.
ones that don't? Because most people have good products and services.
Yeah.
There's got to be something else that's broken, right?
Right. It's the founder, it's the leader, it's the owner, it's whoever that person is. They're the person that's getting in their way.
Mm,
There's this. It's super interesting because as someone that took over an organization and now someone that has bought started my own, and I bought one. I've been at all the different levels, right? And so when you own something, when you found something, it's your baby.
mm-hmm,
Nobody can take care of your baby like you can, or so you think.
mm,
And that's a sort of thought leadership or lack of leadership that gets people in trouble, because now you're gonna do everything yourself. So you have
mm,
to get out of your own way. You literally have to trust people, but you have to take the time to invest in people around you to do the things that will help you get to where you want to be. There's an amazing book called 10x is easier than 2x. And we've talked about this, but the philosophy in there is who, not how. And it's just like, it's instead of trying to figure out how to do all the things, it's surrounding yourself with people that the right who's to do that.
mm,
But that takes an investment. And if you're afraid to make that investment and you just say, I can't do it, then you're always going to be in your way. And
yeah.
so it's really the underlying core of all of this is your aptitude towards risk and your ability to take ownership and let people take ownership with you.
Yeah. I think most people don't know what kind of business they want to build when they first start. And they don't know
Yeah.
if they want to just like own their job, which is a perfectly fine business to own. You just want to own your own job and not report to anybody and just live your life. Some people end up with 10 to 20 person teams, which is kind of the big part of the bell curve when it comes to small businesses. And all of a sudden they
Yep.
look around and they go like, I didn't actually want this. I just wanted to be the HVAC guy or, build metal homes or whatever. Right. So it's
Yeah.
like you, you, you need to start with, or tell me what you think. Like, I think you need to start with some self work and go like, what do I actually want out of this? Like, what do I actually
Yeah.
want? What gives me energy from a business owner standpoint? And then if you end up deciding out of that owning a business is
Mhm.
going to give you energy at that size, like you want to hire
Yeah.
people and you want to lead people and all that, you then have to make the transition from startup culture, which I've done two different startups, right? The barbecue restaurant and now Hy-Vee Marketing. Like when you start, you are rich in time but poor in money in the
Yep.
most parts when you're bootstrapping something. It doesn't even matter if you have money to seed it with, you're still limited on cash. Like there's always more opportunity than cash available in the early days.
Yep.
And what that breeds, the successful companies figure out how to get things done on their own. They either hack their way to it or they sort of piecemeal it together or something like that. And what that essentially means is like when the plumbing springs a leak, they're the one that goes to YouTube and figures out how to fix the leak versus like what you just said, the who of like who's the best plumber I know. Let me just call them. They can fix it so I can keep doing the high value things that I do.
Yeah.
Why why do people that why do people struggle with that transition from the startup phase where you kind of have to do everything on your own to the delegation phase, do you think?
Man, I've had this conversation so many times just in the last 2 weeks, especially if you're a crafts person, right? Every single person that I've worked with in coaching over the last since 2018, they're craftspeople.
Mm,
They've started their business. They started off as a plumber, as an electrician, as a metal home builder, as a behavioral therapist, whatever it is, right? They're really, really good at their craft,
mm,
and then all of a sudden, their people have started to buy what they produce on a larger scale, and so now they're just doing what they've known how to do, but faster in more hours during the day. And it's a completely different skill set to go from doing to actually leading and creating a team and empowering those people around you to do that, to do the things that you do, and to have the confidence that yeah, you have the right people, so now you can give them the vision and that
mm,
they can carry it out, and they may not do it exactly the way you do it, and if you have that fear and that control and it has to be done exactly the way you do it, then you're never going to be able to hire the right people. You're never
mm.
going to be able to release control to let it grow. And that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. It's that mind shift from going from doing from you working in, you and your mom cooking and barbecuing and working in a kitchen to like now building a team, building a restaurant and hiring people to make the sauces and do and smoke the meats and clean the dishes, because they're going to do it a little differently than you have, but as
Hmm.
long as it reaches that vision that you've cast, then it's good.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so, but you have to be able to you have to get out of that doer mentality and into that leading mentality. And that's really hard for a lot of people.
How do people do it? Like, what is your advice to them to actually be able to make that shift? Is it an identification thing within themselves, or do they need to work with a coach like you or somebody else? Like, what's the
Yeah,
process there?
it it's a both and, right. There's that great phrase that you're the sum of you're the average of the five people that you spend the most time with.
Mm,
And if you look around and the five people that you're spending your time with are in your exact same boat, they're doing the exact same things you're doing as a leader, then
mm,
you're never going to be challenged to do it differently, right? So
mm,
having that level of self-awareness to say, okay, I can't, this is where I want to be in 5 years. This is what I want my business to look like. This is what I want my personal life to look like. I have to get out of my way. And I need to surround myself, whether it's a core group of friends, whether it's a coach, whether, it's both and someone that will help me articulate that vision of what I want my business, my life to look like. And then also to help me with the things that I don't know that I don't know.
mm,
Because as a doer and now an owner, you don't know all the things you don't know, and
mm,
surrounding yourself with people that have walked that path, that are a couple of steps ahead of you in your business journey, with a solid business coach, someone that's not just read what to do or how to be a leader in a book, but's actually done it and had real life experience. So now you
mm.
start surrounding yourself with people where you can glean from their experiences, from their failures, from their successes, and that's how you're going to get past that limiting belief that I'm not. It's not going to happen.
I love that. Do you have a favorite story from a client over all your years of coaching where, they sort of started off like a lost cause almost, and then the transformation, like, probably even shocked you a little bit that they were able to make that turn?
It's not even a lost cause, but it's a limiting belief of I'm just going to do this. I've always worked for somebody else. I'm going to go out and start my own thing. And I have a client, and I don't necessarily want to name
Yeah,
names,
no,
but
you're good.
they've been in this industry for their entire lives. They've worked for people in this industry. They left working for someone and created a partnership with somebody else, still leaning on that other person, that partner, to help define success and create success. And then over the years, just working with them one on one and coaching them through those limiting beliefs that, hey, you are good enough to do this and you know how to do this on your own, and coaching them through a split with their business partners to where they're now standing on their own, and
Mm,
they're in their mid 50s in this industry forever, finally have their own business. And when they did the split with their business partners, they were told that in a year they're going to be bankrupt.
mm,
And you fast forward, and it's now 14 months later, and their revenue and profit is exponentially larger than it ever was with that business partner. So I look
mm,
at them and say, and we talk about this all the time because now these clients are really good friends as well. Is that we talk about what it was like a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and just the reflection on making those changes, making those choices, continuing that self-growth journey, to be challenged by me as a coach, and bringing other people in their lives. They wouldn't be where they are right now if they wouldn't have had that level of self-awareness and the desire to step out of that.
yeah. 30 years or something of limiting beliefs sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah.
How can someone who maybe doesn't have one of their five closest people on the level they want to get to, and maybe those five people, for those people, have limiting beliefs themselves, like, what is your encouragement to them? Like, how do they identify that they have self-limiting beliefs? Because
Mm,
it's almost like their reality,
right.
and it's so hard to take what you I mean, perception is reality, right? So
Right.
I'm looking at reality, and I have no idea that it's the wrong reality or that the reality could shift and change. How do you help people actually, or how would people do that before they even get to you to realize I need to call
Yeah.
somebody like a Tiny Irwin?
Man, you know what? And here, the conversation I love to have with people is about dreaming, because it starts with a dream, right? You have to have a dream that gets cast into a vision. And again, if you're just a doer and your entire life has been perfecting that craft, if you've never taken the time to stand back and say, "Gosh, I'm 35 years old. What do I really want my life to look like when I'm 50?" Right? My kids will be out of the house. What do I want it? Do I want it to look like it does right now, or do I want it to, do I want it to be different? And what would it
Mm,
look like? And so, really starting on that personal level of like, man, what if you could just sit there and dream, what is it that you want your life to look like? What do you want your business to look like? And taking the time, the space, giving yourself that freedom to say, okay, I'm not going to do something, produce something for a half a day or a day, but I'm going to take the day and I'm going to dream and I'm going to cast a vision. And then I'm going to honestly ask myself, okay, if that vision is here and I am right here, what needs to be true in order for me to get where that vision is?
mm,
And that's when you just start. You just start those small steps, and then it's that, because I can't make anybody dream. I can't make anybody cast a vision. I can help provide that space, and that's a lot of fun to do. And then it's like the overwhelming part is, well, I don't know how to get there. Okay, but do you know how to put one foot in front of the other for tomorrow?
mm,
What if we make a small change tomorrow? And so now having the clients I've been working with for years, and we reflect on where they were when we started 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And every time we do this, every year, every half year, it's one of those, man, I cannot believe where we are. But it all started with taking the time to actually think about where they wanted to be.
mm. Yeah, it's the old eat an elephant one bite at a time thing,
One bite at a
really.
time.
Yeah. But you said dream in there, and it's gonna help me segue to the next thing. What was the dream behind, or the dream that led to the vision of buying Southern Whiskey Society?
Oh man.
What is that about? I mean,
So
because it's a pivot for context for people.
yeah.
You have a guy who is has helped build another family business, has worked in the trenches with a bunch of other business owners, tends to be family oriented businesses, helping them grow their own things. Like that is a very specific dream and calling and skill set. And then all of a sudden, it's like you're stepping out of that dream into a new dream. And I'm sure
Yeah.
there's some connections there as well. But it is different to be the one that's gone from supporting to now like it's your name on the shingle outside
Yeah.
for the actual like direct consumer business there. So I'd love to hear the heart behind that dream.
Yeah, it's and this is that tension, right? Like I've been a doer my entire life. I'm a really hard worker. I started working when I was 11 years old, and I enjoy working. And there was this confluence of all of these feelings and emotions and thoughts about 2 years ago, especially because I was exclusively coaching. I'm working with clients all over the country. I'm on the road all the time, and I started getting this feeling of I miss like rolling my sleeves up and getting my hands dirty. I love coaching. I love having that influence on large organizations, small organizations. But I've started getting that like I miss the building, the creating, I'm a process driven. We were talking a little bit about this earlier. Like I am while I love dreaming, I'm a great dreamer and I love to cast visions. I also like to be able to create systems and processes to help things grow. And I was missing that. So I was missing that, and I talked to my wife about, hey, listen, I think I want to get back into owning a business, running a business, and then the desire to simultaneously of I'm kind of tired traveling all over the country. My boys are 15 and 12. I had loved being at home. And so I was looking for something locally, really intent on growing my coaching business locally. And honestly, since I moved to Nashville and we've known each other, I've moved into the whiskey space. I never really drank whiskey before we moved here. I was a career beer guy for 20 years, professionally. That's what I did, and never really drank whiskey. And so the culture where we worked was cigars and whiskey, and it was just there. And I started to explore it, and I really and not just love. Here's one of the things I've discovered: like people that love whiskey, they don't love to just drink whiskey, but they just love whiskey. They
Mm,
love the history, the heritage, the stories. They love the thing I love about it is that the connection in the community that it creates. When you and I sit down on my back porch and we have a glass of whiskey, we spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about the whiskey itself. It's not just a bottle of beer that came off a production line in some major city. There's a
mm,
story behind it. And so the confluence of all of those things culminated into me seeing an Instagram post in January of 24 from the Southern Whiskey Society. And I'd heard of it, I'd never been. And the post just said, hey, we're looking for someone to take over the organization. If you're interested, let us know. And I saw this, and I was in leadership at another whiskey group here in Nashville. And I showed it to my wife, and she looked at me and said, "Why wouldn't why wouldn't we do this?"
mm,
And then she's like, one of our core values as a family is that we create community wherever we go. And she said, we'll just use this as a larger megaphone to create community.
mm.
And so we bought it, and that's what we're doing. And it's just really cool. So it scratches all of those itches simultaneously, which I didn't know was possible.
Mm. You know, I have this thing where I tell people to follow their interest and you end up somewhere you want to be.
Yeah.
And if not, you end up becoming interested in something else. And then it's just funny how when you follow things you're interested in, you end up in really interesting places.
Yeah.
And so many people are afraid to chase what they're interested in because it may be new or it may be scary or it may be off the beaten path from a expected career path or family friends what they're all doing and there's safety in numbers for people and I think that's limiting because back
Oh,
to the
yeah.
limiting belief thing all of a sudden it's like hey I'm really interested in whiskey like let me get more involved in clubs let me get more involved in events let me get more involved with friends and people that are doing it and then all of a sudden a opportunity presents itself and you're like I'm interested in owning a
Let's go.
business, and I'm interested in whiskey. Now I've combined these two things, and I have this really cool experience and opportunity. So
Yeah.
when you saw that post, did you end up considering what it would be like to start your own event versus buying an event? Like, why buy a
Yeah.
business first instead of just starting your own thing? Because you've done it both ways.
Yeah. We had uh, one of the first things I did is as I was thinking about this, I pulled together a board of advisors of people, friends of mine that are really, really smart in different aspects, nonprofit, sales, events, live events, all things. And that was the conversation. One of the questions to me was, well, this doesn't seem that difficult. Why don't you just start one on your own? And for me, it fell in line with more of my skill set. I don't necessarily enjoy the creation of a business. I'm not a startup guy. When I work with clients, I don't necessarily work with clients that are startups because that's not my space.
Hmm.
I really enjoy taking something that's already there, it's already been created, and using what Lencioni calls discernment, and I can go in there and I can look at something and say, okay, if we do this differently, if we make these changes, or then it'll result into this. So I really enjoyed that part versus, okay, we're going to start from the ground up.
Hmm.
And I looked at it, and especially in this space, it really didn't get much for the purchase price, other than like I got the domain, which there was not even a website. But what for me it was a transfer of trust with the distiller partners and the community,
Hmm.
because this event had been going on for 5 years before I bought it. So I executed the sixth and now the seventh. So
Yeah,
there was already it was more of a transfer of trust. People knew the brand name, and then I was able to just get that transferred over to me. And I spent the last year just doing a listing tour, to conversations and building relationships in the whiskey industry, which is natural for me because I did in the beer industry for 20 years.
that's so funny. It's funny how it's my favorite Steve Jobs quote where he says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward; you can only connect them looking backwards." And
Hmm.
it's so funny how you can see the different dots in your own life that have like led you to this. And the event has been incredibly successful,
Yeah,
even bigger in the first year last year, and even this is going to be even bigger this year and better. And it's funny how momentum builds over time, and then all of a sudden now you're at this place where something really
yeah.
crazy is happening, right?
Well, would you imagine 3 years ago with you and I sitting next to each other that if you said, "Hey, fast forward 3 years, this is what you guys will be doing,"
Mm.
right? I mean, the whole idea of I'm owning a whiskey company. No, that's crazy.
Yeah. I would say that I could see that being a possibility for you because you have always been very clear on who you are, especially from a value standpoint. Community has always been big for you. So I
Yeah.
opened the podcast today saying one of the great connectors in my life. It's something I admire about you. And I look to when I'm thinking about assembling people, I'm like, what would Tiny do in this situation? And
Mm.
I think there's something to that as well, where you need to know your own tools. I don't believe in strengths and weaknesses. I believe in tools that you have and tools that you don't.
Yeah.
And the reason why I don't believe in strengths and weaknesses is because depending on the situation, the tool you have is either a strength or a weakness. And a
Yeah.
hammer is good sometimes, and a screwdriver is better in other times. And so if you're a connector of people, then that's a great tool to have. And if from in my instance, I'm not a big detail guy. I don't like all the nitty gritty details, and so I
Yeah.
have two co-founders at Highbeam that are like in love with details, and one of them, Ben, is the most detail guy and loves the details more than any human should love details. And
Yeah.
I need that in my life, and I learned that lesson from the barbecue days where I didn't have that balance because I was
Yeah.
with my parents who are basically just half a version of me on both sides. And we were missing that layer of detail and execution. And so I was like, all right, fool me once is fine, but I'm not going to make the same
Right.
mistake twice, right? So when you went through this buying process, right, and it aligns with your values and all the things, and now we're on the other side of it almost 2 years now. What's the like what's the big takeaway? Like, what did you do well in that process of buying a business, and
Mm.
what is something that you wish you could go back and have done differently? And I ask this really selfishly because I would love to eventually be the one buying businesses at some point down the
Yeah.
road.
The only thing I would have done differently is timing,
Mm.
because this event, the company, the Southern Whiskey Society, when I purchased it, was a 1 year. It was an annual event once a year, always in the fall. And so by the time that we'd closed the deal, it was May, I think it was. And so, yeah, so it was May. And there was no website, there was no marketing, the space wasn't rented. It was, it was just, we had to run really, really hard. I would have been more cognizant of that, because knowing that I had from May until August to basically operate under the previous owner's operating principles,
Mhm.
and I was bound by that just because I didn't know any better. Like,
Mhm.
keep in mind, I'd never been to this event. Nobody on my board had been to this event except one person, and so we didn't really know what we were getting ourselves into. So um, I would have, in an ideal world, I would have slowed down the process. I would have liked to have actually experienced what the business was, what the event was.
Mm.
Um, that's the only thing I would have done differently. I feel the price I got it for was fantastic. We've already recouped that and then some, and so that was great. Yeah, that was the one thing. And yeah, I think that's the big thing. Gosh, because remember you worked with me last year on this. I was a mess. I was a mess from May until August when the event happened, because I've never done a live event before. I didn't
Mm.
know all the things I didn't know, and the financial model that we were built on, that we still operated under, led to a lot of stress.
Yeah.
So
Timing is an interesting thing to think about.
yeah,
I don't think there would have ever been a good time. I truly don't believe there's a good time. You can only learn so much from the outside,
yeah,
and it's like at some point you just have to jump in. And my
yeah,
big rule of thumb is like as long as it's not I have two big guiding principles that I don't make tests outside of anymore because I've done this once in my life. It's don't bankrupt the brand and don't bankrupt the business.
yeah,
And it's don't bankrupt the business would be like a financial thing. It's like if you're taking a huge financial risk that you can't come back from, you should not do it. Like if it doesn't
yeah,
work out, like that's what happened to my first business was that we took a financial risk that didn't work out
yeah,
and all of a sudden the whole thing was gone. 6 years of momentum burned up in 6 months. But don't bankrupt the brand is simply like don't be a Nazi on the internet, and then all of a sudden you won't be put into an ostracized box, right? So
yeah.
there is a I think there's always a better time because you learn what you learn, but you never would have even had those lessons had you not even like jumped in
Right.
at that moment. So, and it's a there's a law. What is the law? It is I'm gonna butcher. I believe it's is it Parkinson's law where it's the time expands or the task expands to the time allotted to it.
Yep.
And so had you started in January,
Yeah.
you probably still would have ended up with the same amount of like pressure and all the things anyways, just because the systems, it's really truly just a systems and wisdom thing at the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
like, do you have the systems? Do you know why the systems are there? Are they the right systems? Are they the best practices as far as
Hmm.
systems go? And I don't think it's much more complicated than that. Again, back to the earlier thing about 85% of businesses are the same. Like the
Yeah.
restaurant, we had recipe cards after 6 years, but the first 6 months we did not. And it was my mom just sitting there like tasting everything as she
Yeah.
went. And none of us could help make the food because we didn't know how to make it. And she wouldn't put it down
Yeah.
on a recipe card. It was a whole thing. There was never a good time, right? But
Yeah.
you survive it and you
It's
advance.
and that's a struggle, man. So like going into last year, and it was a great success. And then afterwards, it was the end of August last year, so like August 26th. So we finished the experience, and we're just exhausted. And then September 1st, I go straight into annual planning with my clients. So I'm traveling, I'm on the road for September, October, and part of November. So like I didn't take the time to sit down, and we did an after action review. We sat down with my board. We talked about all the things that that was, was broken, that worked, broken, missing, confused. But then I never took the time to sit down and write out my systems and processes. And
Mm,
I was like, okay, I've got time to do this. That's still right here. Um, and I'll, as soon as the annual planning's over, I'll take the time. Well, then the holidays hit. You don't take time. And then, December early this year hits. And then, with everything goes down with my son. My youngest son has brain cancer in February.
mm,
And so then all of a sudden I lose a half a year.
mm.
And next thing you know, it's June and the event's in 2 months, and I hadn't taken the time to document the things I should have last year. So now I'm rebuilding those. So now
Mm,
I'm building as I go, and as soon as I'm finished, we'll clarify those systems processes so we can build those recipe cards. So God forbid something happens to me, I can give this. Leah has the folder with timeline, systems, processes, the who's, the what's, everything there. So it's not a lost asset then,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
It's still a valuable asset because she knows what to do and how to do it.
So something you said there is really interesting. A lot of people end up owning businesses, and then they're shocked when they go to try to sell it that the thing is not worth more than what the parts they have in it from an
Yeah,
asset standpoint. And then they go like, well, why? This thing, it creates X amount of cash flow every year. Like I should get a 2 to 3 multiple on that, maybe a 4
mhm.
multiple if I'm feeling frisky. And you go, well, okay, how long would the business run if you left? And they say, well, it wouldn't. I have to be here. I have to make decisions. I have to do all the things. And I think this goes full circle back to our
Yeah,
initial part of this conversation where you're talking about building the team, delegating, training, building the systems, all the things. Um, it is all one big game that you just
yeah,
sort of play forever. And the interesting thing is, and I learned this with my first business, is that you would figure something out, you would document it, and then all of a sudden it would create 6 new problems that you didn't even know you had yet. But then
right,
the efficiency of the previous thing had now exposed the inefficiency of other things.
yeah,
And so you really have to fall in love with the building of the thing and not
yeah,
so much the victories of solving problems within the business. Do you think that's
yeah.
right, or do you feel differently?
Dude, it's 100%. It is, and surrounding yourself with a team that you empower to do that, because when you start building those, the clarity is going to expose the issues, but you can't do it all. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, the catalyst for me for all of this is I was actually listening to a podcast about a year and a half ago before I bought this, and a podcast on Built to Sell, and a woman who built an event company and sold it. Well, was on the verge of selling it, had done all of the work. It was the 11th hour, and it was a 20x multiple that she had received from this, and or she was going to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And literally at the 11th hour, right as everything was finalizing, the purchaser came back and said, we're pulling out because we've realized that if you're not in that seat, this whole thing falls apart. So
Mm.
we're going to walk away until you build a team around you. So this whole house of cards isn't focused on you.
Wow.
And so she ended up selling it like 5 years later, and she still got a decent. It was like an 8 multiple,
Mm-hmm.
but it wasn't the 20. And the lesson I learned from there is that I can't be the only person who knows how to make the soup.
Mm-hmm.
I have to be surrounded by people that can make the soup, make it better than me, and do all the things that to go into making the soup. I have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the value isn't. It's the company. The value of the company is me and not the company. And
Yeah.
so,
And it goes back to what you want, right? Because if you're
yeah,
if you're if your self-worth and your dopamine is triggered by you being the one that does the thing and that's all you want, then that's fine. Just be
yeah,
aware of that. But don't be upset when your business hits a certain plateau and you get stuck there, because at the end of the
right,
day you only have 24 hours in a day and sleep's not optional. And so
yeah,
you're going to have to come to terms with the fact that either I'm going to have to develop new skills and learn how to delegate and trust and build teams and lead, or
yeah,
I'm going to be really comfortable with like a team of 2 or 3 where I just am sort of like the genius with helpers,
yeah,
and that's fine. But you're only going to get to a certain point. But again, it's all back to that earlier conversation of self-awareness. So
right,
from a you've had one full event, we're like a week away from the second
yeah.
event. Like, I'd love to know, what is the best part of owning a event company?
Oh man, um, the relationships. The relationships are fantastic. Um, One of the things I loved about the beer industry were the relationships. When I worked for Miller Coors or whoever, the relationships with my distributors I loved.
Mm,
This is the same. It's like I have relationships with chefs and restaurant owners and distillers and vendors, which is awesome. I feel more connected to the community, like really connected to the community.
mm,
But also the joy that I see on people's faces when they're coming in and they're experiencing what we've built, and it's different than most, right? This
Mm,
is not a we're going to this is a bunch of dudes going to get high end bottles of whatever, and we're going to go pound some food trucks.
mm,
Like this is what we're doing is at this stage in my life, my wife and I are creating experiences that we want to experience, and they're transformational, not transactional. So
mm,
we're creating space, and this is the conversation I have with every distiller, every chef, every vendor, is that we're creating a space for you to create lifelong raving fans. We could sell 800 tickets comfortably in this venue, and we're going to sell 300. And we want to create that space so you can interact with the people that come and talk to you.
mm,
It's not just a pour, or have a bite, have a bite, have a bite. It's There's space for you as a chef to be able to talk to the consumers, you as a distiller to bring a unique experience, and now to get to the intent is to cause some excitement. So now you're like, hey, listen, we want to go explore the Kentucky Bourbon Trail for a weekend or 4 days, or listen, we just really enjoy what whiskey brings to our world, and that's just slowing down
mm,
and having a conversation and building intentional relationships, because that's what we do.
mm,
And the very core purpose of the Southern Whiskey Society, if you have to boil it down to one thing, is to battle the epidemic of loneliness. And so
mm,
we're creating these large experiences to inform people about the smaller ones. So we do smaller experiences on a regular basis, and those are focused around getting people around the table over food and
mm.
whiskey to build those relationships. And that's what
That's
we're doing.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I love that, and obviously I know that, but I love that I get to play a small role in giving you a platform here to be able to share
Thank
that
you.
passion because I hear that all the time from you, and it's cool to hear it again. It's very inspiring. But
Thanks.
on the other side, no great dream, no great event, no great anything comes without a cost. And so I'd love to know what's been the biggest challenge in the last 18 months of running this thing for you.
Oh gosh, I think is it's that for me, even though it's just not a startup, it's really a startup in my world, because there's like when I bought a spreadsheet list and a URL. There were no systems processes. So um it's the hardest part's been balancing coaching and balancing
Mhm.
the whiskey society,
Yeah.
um, balancing family, balancing relationships, but also the a byproduct of that, and we've talked a little bit about this, is the realization that the whiskey society and my coaching business can and is merging, and using using whiskey, using food to create these intentional spaces for business owners.
Mm,
Which, like, when this realization happened, my buddy Joseph and I were talking about this, and he said, well, what if you did this? What if you used the whiskey society to create a space for business owners, creatives, influencers around really unique curated food and whiskey experiences?
mm,
And now we start building this intentional community, and so now it's like that the balance of the two has led to a creation of something new,
mm.
and that I'm really excited about, because now it hits on all cylinders.
Yeah.
It hits on that, the battling the epidemic of loneliness for business owners, because I've been there. I'm there.
Mm,
I know how lonely it is. And so, and the last thing I want to do is I don't want to go sit in a boardroom for 8 hours to be part of another high dollar group of executives that sit around the board table again in just another space.
mm.
So just really, the struggles have resulted in some really, really cool manifestations.
Yeah. I think that's the entire game right there. It's
Yeah.
you solve a new problem, which creates new struggles and new opportunities, and then you could choose to either get back in the fight and evolve and become the next thing, or you
Yeah.
can acquiesce and your company sort of fades away into nothing eventually. I
Yeah.
mean, you have to go meet the market where it's moving and meet the people of the market because I love saying the market because it's just a nice shortcut, but essentially like the
Yeah.
market is a bunch of people all together and operating in some sort of form and fashion, and you have to go where they need you to go, and they may not know that they need you to go there. And I think when we have you back on for podcast part two, when you launch this new thing you're talking about, it's going to be really, really exciting. And you can definitely see again how all the dots leading up in your past have led up to this next thing coming, and I'm very excited for that. So
Thanks, man.
we'll make sure. So the Southern Whiskey Society, the tell us about the event that's happening this weekend, and if you're listening to this down the road, we'll make sure the email list is available for you to sign up for, so you can get early access discounts and things like that in the future.
Yeah, man. It's Saturday, August 10th at the factory here in Franklin, Tennessee. We have this year we have 40 distillers that'll be there. We have 10 local chefs. One of the things I'm just really excited about is we're doing an intentional food and whiskey pairing experience. So we've partnered the 10 chefs, each with a different distillery, and we've challenged them to each create a unique food and whiskey pairing experience. So which, people will be able to vote on what their favorite experience is. And I'm just a firm believer that food pairs better with whiskey than almost anything. And so now
Mm,
we've created this opportunity to let people try that. And it's awesome. We have restaurants from a buddy of mine started a new sub sandwich concept in East Nashville called Jambox. And all of the sandwiches are named after 90s songs or artists. And every sandwich has a different type of jam on it, whether it's a savory or sweet. They're pairing with borchetta, bourbon out of Nashville, all the way up to bourbon steak and Michter's are partnering
mm,
together, and 1799 and Old Elk. So we have that whole range gamut of food options. And I think one of our favorites it was last year was we had TJ's cheesecakes, and now he's partnering. He has 5 different types of cheesecakes, and he's partnering with Blue Run Whiskey, and he's making cheesecakes with whiskey and
mm.
pairing them. I mean, stuff like that's mind blowing. Nobody's doing this, and we're just really excited about it. So we've got live music. We have a whiskey lifestyle concept with really high end vendors, leather goods. So it's just going to be an awesome night. And I love cigars, you know, and I just love them. And so we have just a really highly curated cigar experience outside with Casa de Monte Cristo from Nashville. So it's just everything. There's a lot of thought and intentionality about behind it. And the question was on everything, would I want to go spend time doing this experience within the experience? And if the answer is yes, then we're doing it.
Well, I can tell you, last year was a lot of fun. We were lucky at
Thanks.
High Beam to play a very small role in helping you make that event happen, and it was a
Oh,
great time. It was crazy that
we
you'd
would
only had it for
we
a
wouldn't
few
have been
months.
as successful if you guys weren't involved, man. Your team has been fantastic. I appreciate you guys.
Oh, thanks, man. It means a lot. We love working with you. I would love to end the show. As you can see behind me, I love books. It's probably my biggest kryptonite. I have a dream to like build my own library with one of those fun little ladders that rolls around on
Oh
a
yeah.
in a wood room. So, what is your favorite book to recommend for the business owner that you work with?
Oh man. Right now, it's within the last year, it's 10x is easier than 2x. It is just it's mind blowing with the different concepts in there. Um, and the gap in the gain, the who not how. There's just some amazing concepts in there that help you as a business owner get out of your way and
Mm.
take some risks that you normally wouldn't take. But by reading about, there's it's filled with data and statistics. I have all of my clients reading that.
I love that. So the last question is it's a marketing themed question because I own a marketing agency. And so I would love to know from you as a business owner, like what is your biggest question or issue with marketing?
God, dude, we've talked about this. I don't understand anything to do with social marketing because everything's changed from when I was a kid, and like social media habits, how to engage with people, how to open new markets, right? So when we start talking about taking this on the road and moving to it, going to Atlanta and Fort Worth and Charleston. How do we market in those areas? I don't know.
Mm.
I
It's a,
just don't know. So those are my questions. How do you do that? How do
it's a
you
good
open up new
question.
markets? How do you increase brand awareness to people that should know but don't know?
Mm. I think well, this is fun. So to start with, like things have changed since you were a kid from a where people get their information and where people spend their time. But what hasn't changed is people. And so
Yeah,
people still work during the day and they want to waste time at night. And so whether they used to do that with newspapers or books, and then the radio came along and they did it with that, and then they did it with TV for a long time, and now they do it with phones in their hand while they're watching TV in the background.
yep.
And so people have always looked for escapism, and the role of marketing has always been to show up where people are and try to create a experience not too different than your event where you leave people feeling something, some sort of emotion, because an ad without an emotion is pointless. Essentially you've
Right.
just created noise and it's not super memorable, right? So if you understand that concept that people haven't changed, they just happen to be doing it on social media like TikTok or Instagram or YouTube or whatever, then you go, okay, I know basically how to create emotions around my things, which is what you
Mhm.
do with all your pictures and videos and all the things around that. Then it's an awareness problem. And the two ways you can get awareness now, or three ways really, is either you have organic social media, which is you post a video and you hope that it gets organic distribution, which is
Right.
really tough to do. I mean, you're competing in organic social today with essentially professional content creators. Like their whole job is to create content on the internet, and it's just most business owners shouldn't be trying to compete with that. Um, the second way is to get earned media with a local PR thing, radio shows, TV shows, local influencers talking about your event, something like that. And then the third way is my favorite way, and it's the way that nobody wants to do because it seems too simple. It's just run ads, like pay the money, run the ads, because you're going to be able to guarantee that your content shows up in front of a very targeted group of people. And it's funny, you give yourself a hard time about this marketing thing sometimes, but you're incredibly coachable. And every time we've worked together on your events, you've had thoughts and ideas, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're very wrong, and we'll let you know. And you're always the first one to be like, all right, cool, that sounds good, let's try that. And then if it doesn't work out and you're right, then we get to play the, well, I'm sorry, I guess you were right game. And but for the
Which
most
is
part,
always great.
it's just been a, like, as we increase awareness, ticket sales go up and among the right people. And
Yep.
it's before you do anything though, and we talked about this, when you go to open a new market or anything like that, you have to perfect the box you have now, right? You have to perfect the current offering that you have, which is what I think you did between year one and year two. And I know it's
Mhm.
going to be room for growth and all the things and improvement later,
Yeah.
but you have to get what we call product market fit. And product market fit is only defined for me when people are willing to advertise my business for me for free with word of mouth marketing and referrals. And so this year we're
Mhm.
seeing like, oh yeah, I told my buddy about this event and now they're coming, and like now you're building more of a reputation, because the event totally changed. I'll say this, between what the previous ownership did and what you guys are
Yeah.
doing. And that's a big hurdle to climb for you guys, where you're trying
Yeah.
to reestablish in the market that first impression that the other event created, whether it was good or bad. And now you guys are trying to redefine that for people. So you guys have now got product market fit with this event specifically. And now people are telling people about it. And when you get to that point, then it's like, cool, let's pour the gasoline on the fire. Let's run ads. Like, let's make sure the creative's good. And then let's open it up. And now when you go to a new market, yeah, year one's always tough. But
Yeah.
again, you're trying to create product market fit within that environment. But at least you already have perfected the box in another city to where it's a lot less risky to go open Atlanta or Charleston or
Yeah.
Fort Worth. So,
Well,
you know,
now it's a
it's
good. I'd never had that before. I was at a restaurant last week, and I'm sitting there with a buddy of mine, and my buddy introduced me to the owner, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Tiny owns. He's with the Southern Whiskey Society," and this is the first time it's ever happened. He's like, "No way, you're the guy." He's like, he pulls his phone out and shows me a text he had just got from a buddy of his, and said, "Hey, are you going to this? I'm going. We should really go check this thing out." And I was like, "This is awesome." It made me feel good. That's like people are starting to hear and know and talk about
it takes so much longer than you want it to take,
it. Yeah.
but when it starts to work, it becomes unstoppable. I still get text messages, or not text, but I get direct messages on like Instagram and social media from people that used to eat at Lyle's Barbecue and still text me about it to this day or message me about it.
Oh yeah.
And it's a even when it takes a long time to build that momentum up, it once you're in people's minds as that option and like that thing they love, it doesn't
Yeah.
really go away overnight. And that business has been closed 4 years now, 5 years
Wow.
almost. And so
That's great.
it's a yeah, the power of building a brand and building awareness and building momentum and all the things that marketing can do when it's done right is incredible. The problem people have with marketing is that it is a industry that is filled with gurus. And if I told you that 80+% of my clients have a horror experience with a previous agency, like you wouldn't believe it. But it's basically every single one of them is like, I
Yeah.
used to work with this other agency. They drove me crazy for X, Y, and Z reasons. And now I'm with you guys and it's great. So a lot of marketing is just trust. Do you trust the people that you're working with? Because you're spending
Right.
a ton of money and that money's got to go to work because cash flow is a big problem for any business owner. And marketing is a great way to burn cash.
Yeah. Totally.
You know that.
Yep. Yeah.
Tiny brother, man, I appreciate it. We'll put a link
Thanks,
for
Chandler.
everybody get the tickets for this weekend Southern Whiskey Society event. If you can't make it this weekend, join their email list because they
Yeah.
send out amazing offers for future events, smaller events, the intimate stuff that Tiny was talking about, but also
Yeah.
you get on the early bird for next year's event or one of these other cities that may be coming, and then ultimately the super secret event that or the super secret offering that you're working on
Hmm.
now, which combines the coaching world and the whiskey world, and I'm really excited for that. So
Me too.
Tiny man, I appreciate you. I appreciate
Thanks.
everybody out there watching and listening. We will see you next week.